This Sunday on Capital Connection, calls for calm amid chaos.
We cannot allow those who have taken advantage of this moment to loot and smash, to also steal the voices of those expressing a need for real, meaningful change.
How mass demonstrations and uncomfortable confrontations sparked conversations about racial violence and injustice. House Democrat Cam Buckner joins us, and the Shriver Center on poverty law on where we go from here.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol Bureau Chief Mark Maxwell is asking the tough questions. This is Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell reporting from the Illinois State House on this Sunday, June 7. This week was a flashpoint in American politics as thousands and thousands of protesters and demonstrators took to the streets in our city, in our state, and across our country. In some cases, agitators and troublemakers tried to turn those protests into acts of opportunism, or worse, crimes of vandalism, arson, and looting. But the larger arc of the message remained focused on police brutality and violence committed against people of color.
Please let me stay in. I can't breathe on the
Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin now faces second-degree murder charges. 3 other officers who stood and watched also faced charges for aiding and abetting the murder of 46-year-old George Floyd.
Kill me, man.
Their prosecution marks the first steps in the pursuit of justice for Floyd's death. But those painful moments, caught on camera, reopened a national wound and reignited a national spark in the push for racial justice. Demonstrations fanned across the country, including protests in Springfield, where activists called for accountability and reform.
Be out here with us. It's all about educating. There has to be some type of sympathy, like empathy, you know? I feel like also with the police, they're going to need some trauma training. They're going to need culture training. They're just going to have to revamp the whole system.
One day after violence, vandalism, arson, and looting broke out in Chicago and in Champaign, Springfield's demonstrators set out to prove a point.
It's peaceful, no rioting, no looting, nobody's fighting, everybody's together. This is what we need. Set the example, Springfield. Set the example for this country.
The Illinois Legislative Black Caucus issued calls for calm after days of unrest across parts of the state.
Let's take this opportunity to deal with criminal justice reform and the state of emergency that we are now under due to rioting.
Dozens of African-American state lawmakers condemned looting, vandalism, and arson and called for a unified response to find solutions to end systemic setbacks and police violence.
Our children, our men, and our women do not feel protected, but we do not condone looting.
Stop destroying our communities. Listen to our young people. Our message is to work together to build the infrastructure in the black community.
Governor Pritzker deployed hundreds of members of the Illinois National Guard throughout the state to help provide support to local law enforcement. The governor also declaring a disaster in 14 counties after vandalism and looting damaged many businesses, including in some cases, black-owned businesses. While protests in our state capital remained calm, peaceful protests in our nation's capital were met with force. In a Tuesday phone call with American governors, President Trump offered military force to crack down on protests that in some cases had evolved into vandalism, looting, and arson.
If you don't dominate, you're wasting your time. They're going to run over you. You're going to look like a bunch of jerks. You have to dominate.
On that call, Governor Pritzker pushed back against what he called inflammatory rhetoric directly to the president and later in public, arguing the president's words only make the difficult job of law enforcement that much harder.
You know, when you don't have national leaders who are bringing down the temperature in situations like this, it tends to fan the flames. Look at the words that the president has put out on Twitter. Look at the words that he says. You know, he talks about total domination. I don't want to dominate peaceful protesters who have legitimate grievances.
In a speech from the Rose Garden, the president claimed he's an ally to peaceful protesters.
And an ally of all peaceful protesters.
But his rhetoric in recent years targeting Colin Kaepernick, who used a national platform to engage in a peaceful protest.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a off the field right now, out, he's fired.
3 years after those remarks, President Trump forced peaceful protesters off the streets of our nation's capital, with heavily armed police forces firing chemical agents and rubber bullets to clear the way for him to take a picture with a Bible in front of a historic church building that had sustained fire damage the night before. That's when military helicopters flew low overhead to drive protesters out of the streets. Senator Tammy Duckworth was flying a similar military helicopter over Iraq when she lost both of her legs in 2004.
And then last night, I watched as President Trump, having gassed peaceful protesters just so he could do this photo op, then he went on to tear gas priests who were helping protesters in Lafayette Park. And then he went on to remove a member of the clergy and a layman from the church patio so he could have his photo op. And as he was walking there, he was followed behind him by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in military fatigues and the Secretary of Defense, walking along like lapdogs behind a draft-dodging wannabe tin pot dictator. And I was appalled that this commander-in-chief was flying Black Hawk helicopters above Americans exercising their First Amendment rights. How dare you politicize our military? Our military is the most diverse institution in this country. Our military is one of the final places where Americans have nothing but greatest respect. How dare you pervert the honor of our military by threatening to use them against their fellow Americans? I am sickened to the core by this man.
The shocking show of force against peaceful protesters in our nation's capital caused General James Mattis, President Trump's former Secretary of Defense, to break his silence and cross a line to criticize his former commander-in-chief. Mattis, writing in a letter published in The Atlantic, quote, "Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people, does not even pretend to try. Instead, he tries to divide us." Later, current Defense Secretary Mark Esper backpedaled from that moment.
I was not aware of a photo op was happening.
And publicly broke with the president's calls to send the military into American streets.
I do not support invoking the Insurrection Act.
Later, the Shriver Center on Poverty Law joins us with a look at where we go from here. But next, Representative Cam Buckner, a man who picked up a push broom and started cleaning the streets in his district this week.
Be as cool and relaxed as these dogs. Let your friends at Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing install a new Lennox home comfort system for you. We offer special financing plus $1,000 off a complete Lennox system or a free water heater. Call us today and ask about all of the ways we can help take care of the indoor air quality in your home. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend.
This is a paid advertisement for legal services from Fierce Nachawati Law Firm.
Have you or a loved one been diagnosed with ovarian cancer after regular use of Johnson & Johnson baby powder? You may be entitled to compensation. On May 19th, 2020, Johnson & Johnson announced it will discontinue selling its talc-based baby powder products in the U.S. and Canada after thousands of lawsuits alleging asbestos contamination led to a 60% decline in sales over the past 3 years. Substantial verdicts have already been awarded against Johnson & Johnson because of their failure to warn the public of this risk, including a $4.69 billion verdict in July 2018 and 3 other verdicts totaling over $614 million. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with ovarian cancer after regular use of Johnson & Johnson baby powder for feminine hygiene purposes, You may be entitled to compensation. How do you fight for the compensation you deserve? You choose the right legal team that has the experience and resources to get you the most compensation for your injuries.
Mike here with Mattex Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. Purchase your new Train system this spring and get 0% APR financing or up to $1,000 in instant rebates. Visit MattexService.com for details. Get the fix with Mattex.
Is your sidewalk or driveway settled? Seal-tight insulation and slab jacking is the answer. Locally owned and operated, we use polyurethane, the most advanced and successful slab jacking system available to lift your country. And we offer a lifetime guarantee. Raise it right with Seal-tight.
Steam cleaning your car is the natural way to blast out dirt, grime, and bacteria. Recontex gets into the vents and hiding places, and right now, if you're a nurse, doctor, or police officer, you can get a free steam cleaning of your front cabin. Thank you for the hard work you're doing at this uncertain time. Recontex Ultra Strong Steam Cleaning for any vehicle. RecontexSpringfield.com.
Recontext. Proof is in the performance.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. All week we watched across our state and across our nation as activists and demonstrators marched in the streets and demanded to be heard. But what was it that they were trying to say? Joining us now to help offer some perspective on this is House Representative Cam Buckner from his home office in Chicago's South Side. Representative, good to have you with us.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me.
There was a lot of pain expressed this week on the streets of Chicago, on the streets of our state and our country. A lot of activists went out and expressed what I heard as anguish and rage. What is it that, I think that this is obvious, stemming from the death of George Floyd in the hands of police in Minnesota, with what we saw there. But when I listened to some of the speakers, they also talked about centuries of similar pain. What is it that you heard that people are trying to express right now in this moment?
You know, I think you hit the nail on the head as you began, right? This was about pain, but this was pain that has turned into anger. And while George Floyd's death in Minneapolis was the catalyst for many of these demonstrations, both in Chicago and around Illinois and across the country, it wasn't the cause, I think, for a lot of these feelings for people. People have felt this for a very long time. This is not just about his death. This is about the death of hundreds of folks who have been unarmed and killed by law enforcement. But furthermore, it's also about economic disinvestment. It's about, neighborhoods and places not feeling safe, healthy, and educated. This is about people feeling marginalized and forgotten and ignored. And it came to a head, and we see it now at full tilt across our country. But specifically, in the district that I represent, I'm seeing it every day.
We heard from our leaders, even President Obama, who said there is no rationale for criminal behavior. He was referencing some of the rioting and looting that did happen. Other leaders said that's a distraction from the larger message. So I won't ask you to rationalize or justify any of the rioting or the looting. But when you step back and you look at that from the broader perspective, what do you think that signified? Was there some larger scream being heard there in that act, in the act of looting, or was there some intent on the part of some to sort of share some of that pain or rage with other communities that maybe hadn't felt it the same way?
I think this is about, the age-old adage of comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. This was about, to a lot of folks, spreading the pain around. It was about spreading the anguish and making sure that people understood that people were upset. These neighborhoods in which these things happen, people did not feel as if they were owners or even a part of the community. They felt like they were occupants, right? And what we saw play itself out in the most starkest terms is that people wanted their voice to be heard. And while we condemn the criminal acts, I've heard from people in my district and across the city, because I've been out in this community every day since last week, and their their call is that, you've told us not to scream. You've told us not to yell. You've told us not to protest. And we're tired of you telling us how to react to the things that are happening to us every day.
I was stricken this week, if I can share this story, just with the difference that it must feel like watching some of these scenes play out on a screen from the safety of your home and your couch and seeing it. And the difference being there. I was at one of the protests that broke out in the streets of River North, Chicago, perhaps in your district even, on Saturday night a week ago. And it was a chaotic scene. There was a young man taking a baseball bat to a storefront salon window, maybe just 10 steps from me, and we captured that footage and saw it there. But, we're supposed to stay neutral, objective observers as journalists. It was hard to do that in that moment. I was, frankly, afraid because I didn't quite know. There was no law enforcement around to protect me. I didn't know what stopped him from turning the bat from that window to me. I was heartbroken for the small business owner who owned that salon, who lost a lot of value there. Maybe it'll be covered by insurance, but no fault of their own. And frankly, in the moment, I was angry that someone could treat someone else's property with such disregard. And then almost immediately I caught myself and I thought, wait a minute, maybe that was the point. Maybe for a fleeting second, I felt what that young man must have felt his entire life. Fear for his own safety in his own home or in his own neighborhood. Heartbreak that his neighbor's property was treated with disregard. And anger that someone else, an officer of the law even, might afflict that kind of violence on someone else for passing a fake cigarette or a fake $20 bill. And I wondered if maybe that was the point.
I think that is the point. And I too, have been in the middle of at least a half dozen of these demonstrations, these protests since this happened. On Sunday afternoon, I was with my family celebrating a birthday here in my home, and we heard helicopters and we heard sirens, and I just walked down the street and I walked into the middle of one of the larger protests that was occurring here in the city. And what I know is the way I felt in that situation and how it affected me. There were a bunch of my neighbors there. There were a bunch of cops there. There were a bunch of media there. I've never been afraid of my neighbors. I've had times in my life where I've been afraid of law enforcement. But to see them all converge in that heightened sense of anxiety and people, attempting at that point to go from protests to and there was some looting that was involved in that situation as well. And to them, once again, it was about making people uncomfortable. These are folks who live in these situations their entire life. These are folks who, once again, feel marginalized and feel like there is no one that listens to them. We live in the richest country in the world, and yet we have, so many folks that live under the poverty line without any lifeline for them. In the last 30 years, China, India, and Indonesia have been able to pull 1.5 billion people out of poverty. But here in America, we don't have that same that same result. So I think people are just fed up. They are screaming at the top of their lungs. And Mark, I can't help but think that this time has to be different because it feels different, and I think the results will be different.
Yeah. An interesting conversation. I appreciate you sharing some of your perspective with us on that. Representative Cam Buckner joining us from his home office. Thanks for hopping on.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
We're back in just a moment with the Shriver Center on Poverty Law to look at where some of this conversation, where some of this momentum may lead here in Springfield. We're back in a moment.
Affordable? Yeah, we got that. Stylish? Got that covered too. Quality? You can bet on it. At Furniture Row, we take pride in furniture that's value priced, built to last, and makes your home look amazing. And during the epic summer sale, everything is on sale. Like the Fulton sofa, only $3.99. The Blake bed, just $2.49. Plus 5 years no interest and free local delivery right to your doorstep. Shop the largest selection at the lowest prices guaranteed. The epic summer sale, on now at Furniture Row.
In the Army National Guard, family means everything.
Our parents, they were really supportive that all 5 of us would join. I got my education because of the Guard. I got to travel a little bit and experience a whole different culture. It helped me get my job, helped me pay for my house. Being part-time really helped because I could have some opportunities that were still in education.
Serving part-time in the Army National Guard instills pride that you and your family will share. Visit NationalGuard.com to learn more about part-time service.
Hello, I'm Craig McDonald with the McDonald Real Estate Company. Since 2010, we've been Champaign-Urbana's #1 team. And I'd like to introduce you to my Flex Plan listing, offering flexible commissions, the right to sell it yourself, and if you're not happy with my performance, fire me at any time. Let my clients speak.
2 homes sold in less than 6 days. Sold before it hit the market.
Sold in 1 day.
I'm not bragging, I'm applying for a job, and I want to be your realtor. Give me a call today at 217-359-7971, and thank you.
Right now, it feels like the world is standing still. But if you look to the land, it's a whole different story. From farms to backyards, seeds are being planted, animals are being fed, grass is growing, and families are giving their all to the soil because the land never stops. So to all those linked to the land, Sloan Implement and John Deere say thank you. We're here for you because we all run together. Visit Sloans.com. We're John Deere people too.
Powered up with Sloan.
Hi, I'm Josh Michaels with Backyard Leisure. We're your hot tub experts here in Central Illinois. Our job is to help you find the perfect hot tub for you and your family. Not everybody knows that there are legitimate wellness benefits from regular hot tubbing. Of course there are physical benefits, but hot tubbers also experience mental wellness, emotional wellness, even relational wellness by spending improved time with the people they love. Come see us at 1434 Wabash Avenue here in Springfield. I'm Josh at Backyard Leisure. Hot tub, you need it.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Many of the protesters who marched in Springfield and across the state this week called for change at the ballot box and in our laws. Joining us now to take a look at what some of that momentum, what some of that change might one day look like is Audra Wilson from the Shriver Center on Poverty Law, joining us from her home office in Chicago. Audra, good to have you with us.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
First of all, before we jump into some of this, I understand the Shriver Center focuses on racial inequality, structural racism, things of that nature. But how are you doing? If you can, just recap for us what you felt, what you've gone through, what you've seen this week.
Well, I appreciate you asking, and it's been challenging. I was so excited to return to Shriver. I am the new president and CEO, and I'm an alumnus of the organization. And so I was so looking forward to my first day and starting back at the great work that it does. But leading up to my first day, it's when I basically watched our country erupt. It had come to this fever pitch where people were so angry and tired of feeling devalued, of feeling disrespected. And you saw these protests erupting and emerging all around the country. And so that sentiment has even carried through with my amazing team. Each and every one of us has felt this personally. You have people on staff who are raising Black boys, Black children, but especially young Black boys. You have individuals on our team who are coming from the communities that have been the most impacted, not only by this crisis of violence, but also with the COVID pandemic. So as we are advocates and we are professionals and we're able to talk about that in professional capacity, it was impossible to engage in this sort of dialogue about what happens next without acknowledging how this was impacting each and every one of us personally.
And I suppose I owe you an apology. I forgot to mention the transition and your new career move right as we were introducing you. But yeah, a new venture as you return to the Shriver Center there. Perhaps a renewed sense of purpose in these days. But you used a word that strikes me, devalued. And it seems that is the core intent of our pursuit of justice, after all, is that everyone is valued the same. We have this notion in this nation that everyone is created equal, but then they get their paycheck, or then they show up in court, or then they interact with police. And those different interactions can look a lot different for different people based on where they live, perhaps based on how much they earn or how they look.
Absolutely. And I think this is a point that's so important to underscore. So you're thinking about, it's addressing structural racism. And structural racism has resulted in Black and brown communities receiving less in terms of quality education, employment, healthcare, housing, and resources. They are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system. They are dealing with environmental issues. And it's pervasive. So when we think of, for example, we jumped into the fray, obviously, as it pertained to COVID-19, because we address health disparities. And we know that COVID-19 has been a serious threat to all Americans. And so, of course, you know, we have been working 24/7 to be working on protecting our communities. But the thing is that this virus, though the virus doesn't discriminate, human beings do. So when you have structural inequalities in your healthcare system, imagine that a virus that is already consuming our nation, consuming our world, you know, because it is so virulent. Imagine the disproportionate impact on communities that are already disadvantaged, communities that are already lacking resources, people who are already underinsured or uninsured. So that's where the connection of structural racism, that's how it feeds into this narrative. So anything that's impacting the average American may be impacting particular segments of our population even more because of that structural inequality.
Now that businesses are reopening, Central Illinois knows who to call to get their lives back in order. They call McDonald. Consider McDonald sanitizing and disinfection service and see if it's the right choice for you. We've been your trusted partner in the community for over 40 years.
Ready to sell your home in 2020? With a guaranteed offer from Ryan Dallas Real Estate, skip the process of listing your home and go straight to sold, closing in as little as 3 weeks. Stay hassle-free with Ryan Dallas Real Estate's guaranteed offer. It's selling made simple.
Man owns water. Hydro engineers have built big, tough systems to contain her strength. It might cover 71% of Earth, but man has ultimately won the battle.
Mr. Rooter Plumbing, sink, shower, and toilet emergency drain services. Because water is too powerful to fight alone.
Napoleon makes some of the most coveted grills. Maybe it's the restaurant quality sear from the 1800-degree sizzle zone, the heavenly aroma of the wood chip smoker tray, or all the other engineering details that make a Napoleon a Napoleon. What's really important is that you make one your own.
Hey, Pete. Yeah. You've got your own grill. You know, at your house.
Napoleon Grills, only at Mark's, your outdoor living headquarters.
At Ostling & Associates, we handle bankruptcy and only bankruptcy. When you need help, call Ostling & Associates. There's only a $750 fee for single filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Bankruptcy questions? Visit our website at bcyhelp.com. An emergency bankruptcy can stop foreclosures, judgments, repossessions, utility shutoffs, and court proceedings. Call Ostling & Associates with 20 Illinois offices to serve you. Call Ostling & Associates now and stop the collection calls.
That does it for us this week. As always, you can find our full extended interviews up online. Thank you for watching. We hope you'll join us again at the same time next week. For Capital Connection, I'm Mark Maxwell.